Okay, so when I started, the early slides, I put up the slide that said, patients are certainly overwhelmed. They've got a lot on their plates, and yet we want them to understand the importance of their subtypes. So I'm going to start with Anne and Jenny talking about one of the things we did, talk about building trust on direct-to-patient was, as the 5 foundations, you were not allowed to come to the Kraft initiative unless you told us how many patients you actually had in your database. Because here's the secret. Nonprofits and patient groups don't actually ever want to share that number because it's low. It's lower than you would think. They get pharma grants on education based off the number of patients they have in their database. So we said, come to Kraft, come to HBS, you share the number. I will never share that number with anybody else. Some actually are doing great, some not so great. We didn't care. The point was, could we create a goal together, which was, whatever that number was, we wanted to double it, for example. And this is just giving you an idea of collective impact. So I want Anne and Jenny just to talk with us about how hard it is to get patients to come under the nonprofit umbrella, because it seems so obvious that they would.
Yeah,
okay.
No, it's hard, it really is. And you're starting with a smallish disease to begin with. So we're looking for approximately 55,000 Americans who will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer this year. And it's truly like looking a bit for a needle in a haystack. And certainly online is where we put a lot of our efforts. We want to be advertising and reaching, and patients who are searching for information, we want them to find us. But you put yourself in the patient's shoes. You get this diagnosis, and a lot of times you've been misdiagnosed for a long time as well. So you're not feeling well, and then you get to your doctor, and you finally get the diagnosis, and the doctor says, okay, you've got pancreatic cancer, and don't go on the internet and look at the statistics. But of course, the patient will go on the internet, and there they are bombarded with all manner of information. I mean, last year there were 37 cancer institutes that spent $266 million to reach cancer patients and families. There were 17 pharma companies that spent upwards of $250 million in advertising. You go onto Facebook, there are 250,000 groups with subtypes and conversations happening. You Google it, you put it in YouTube, you are overwhelmed with this cacophony of noise. And so how do we break out? How do we reach this very vulnerable population at a critical time where we know we've got the answers, we've got the information to get you on the best course so that we can extend your life? I sort of think about it, it's like we're a bit on a blind date with them, and we need to be able to at least get to having dinner together before they know they belong to us and they want to work with us. So.
Yeah, and for us, as the most uncommon and little-known cancer of the 5, so we were thrilled. I was thrilled because we're together with you guys. Everyone knows pancreatic, lung, metastatic breast, prostate, and then there's myeloma. No one knows about myeloma. We only have 30,000 new cases a year. And for us, our median age of diagnosis is 70. So you also have a population, they're not really online, and they really trust their doctors. And we should all trust our doctors. Yep. But, doctors aren't saying, oh, go to the MMRF site. Right. The MMRF has all that you need. It's really, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure that, you get what you need. But the truth is, in a disease like myeloma, even if you're seen by a hematologist oncologist, they're seeing all different blood cancers. And one, it's a little off topic, but I just want to share it because it reinforces a point that even myeloma specialists can't keep up with everything. I was talking with a patient just on Monday, and very educated patient, and she has a certain chromosomal translocation 414 where there's a treatment for CLL that can work for her. She found out about it. She's seen it at an academic medical center, went to her doctor, had never used the drug before. So her doctor's then calling someone else at the Mayo Clinic who'd done the research. So you have to stay on top of it, but we can provide that information. Incidentally, it was found through one of our trials, that observation, but it's so important. But it's hard, as Jenny said, to break through that clutter.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, just to add to that, we were talking about this last night, is in other areas, when you need something, you may not have known you need it, but it's sort of been there and you've been paying attention to your whole life. So we talk about, when people get married, right? Your friends are getting married, so now young people, when they get married, they go on the knot, right? So everybody knows the knot is there. Or things like that where you might not need it, but at a time where you're ready for it, it's kind of in your consciousness. Nobody is sitting around waiting to get pancreatic cancer.
Right.
So the moment that happens, when you're with your doctor, you don't know that PanCAN is the trusted place to go to, that will take care of you, that doesn't have, like Kathy always says, a favorite doctor, a favorite drug, a favorite hospital. They only care about you. But nobody in their life is paying attention to pancreatic cancer until that moment where it is so in front of you and you want to move so quickly. So if your doctor tells you to do something, you're just going to listen and you put blinders on. So I think that's part of the challenge that we have is these things tend to be moment in life where then you have to get quickly up to speed and you don't know who were you supposed to have trusted.
Yeah. No,
So Lori, you came, so Lori has, she's a breast cancer survivor, but she's also a direct-to-consumer specialist. So she was at Pepsi and the Children's Place and Peloton. So she now chairs this work stream, and talk about a commitment. These 5 cancers are on the phone every week. Every week, and nobody complains. I mean, you all love working together, and the information they've shared has been absolutely mind-blowing. But the point was, if you're not able to get the patient to give you their email on the website, it means somehow they're confused or they don't see the value. Right. So, Lori, talk a little bit about the direct-to-consumer companies that have been so kind about coming up on campus and teaching us how to do this better.
It's incredible. So what's interesting is, I think there's just a beautiful story there about all of these direct-to-consumer companies that I've been able to reach out to. Some places that I worked, like people I know from Pepsi or Kira Green Mountain or Peloton, but also we have Blair in the room who's from Reebok. We had Rent the Runway and Rue La La, Chanel. I mean, we had an incredible, everything. Patients Like Me has been very generous as well. And then we've had other people like Kantar Health who's done a little bit of work for us, but has given us this much of their time. And so I think what's interesting is when we first set out to do this, what I thought would happen, I've spent 30 plus years in consumer marketing, and I know a little bit about health as a cancer survivor and also being on the MMRF board for years. I thought what was going to happen is I would invite these people to come to our meetings, they would talk in consumer language, and then I would translate it for the nonprofits. So Rent the Runway would come talk about, customer journey, and then I would say, you guys, that's like patient journey, right? Or, Brad from Peloton and Starwood would get up and he'd talk about building loyalty and trust, and I would say, that's like when a patient is diagnosed. And I thought I was going to have to play this kind of great translator role between, cancer and the nonprofits and the consumer world. And I think what you all would testify to is it's instant. I mean, the similarities are so incredible. So these companies have been so clear and so focused and so generous with their time. But I think what is so key, and I'd say it to everyone in the room, and Kathy's heard me say this now for 12 or 14 years, is patients are consumers. When you are diagnosed, you do not suddenly get a PhD in pharmacology, or you don't suddenly wake up with an MD. You are a consumer who is unlucky enough to be diagnosed with cancer, or a consumer who is unlucky enough to have a patient or a spouse or somebody else. But the reality of it is, these nonprofit organizations, you have to be able to talk to people as patients and then also use the same sort of tactics and skills, whether it's driving people to your website, capturing their emails on the website, basic kind of acquisition, retention, engagement, all of the same things that world-class consumer companies do. Those are the same tactics and techniques that cancer organizations and nonprofits should be using.
So one thing we did that was, one of the activities that we all worked on together was doing the market research together. So touch upon how the market research got developed and how fast we were able to do some of these things when, again, you're going across all cancers, and how you can use that.
Amazingly fast, and I do think it speaks to this trust and the efficiency and some of the synergies that we have realized through working together And again, belaboring the point, this really wouldn't have happened without this Accelerator program. I mean, I know it does sound so obvious, aren't cancer groups working together? No, they're not. And I wouldn't have been talking and meeting with Anne, and we wouldn't have been talking to Longevity if this had not happened. And it has been so rewarding and so beneficial. I can't pick up the phone and call Peloton and Rent the Runway and say, come and give us your presentation and tell us, how do we maximize our engagement and retention. So yes, it's been really amazing. And I think where I've seen the most efficiencies is around the development of the campaign that you mentioned, starting with the market research. So again, Kantar Health worked with us, and I would say within 6 weeks, we deployed our first survey last spring. And really we were looking at, could 5 cancer groups agree that there are key steps in a precision medicine roadmap? Could we identify the same barriers, the same knowledge gaps, and agree that this would fundamentally work across all cancers? And the answer was a resounding yes. The same educational needs exist. It is consistent across all of us. We then deployed a second market research survey with Kantar a little over a month ago. This time we were delving a little bit deeper into the specific questions around each of the key steps, getting to the right team, the right testing, right treatment. And again, we wanted to see, what are the barriers, and really get some good data and establish a crisp baseline around each of those so that we really understood then what do we need to impact as we roll out a digital campaign that we are getting ready to launch in the middle of May. How do we know we are really going to have changed behaviors? And if we didn't have that baseline, obviously we wouldn't be able to measure that. So there have been incredible efficiencies. Just from a cost perspective, we did it on, dollars, really, and the creation of the right track itself. We had an agency that we all worked with, so we shared those costs. We amazingly came up with this brand visual that you showed earlier. And I just think that this is the best way we're going to be able to educate patients about precision medicine and get them on the right track.
And what was fascinating, so the MMRF spent, what did we spend? Like a couple $100,000, a lot of money to do a very comprehensive market research. We did it with, we did qualitative, quantitative, physicians not. And what we found was that patients who were connected with the MMRF were twice as likely to make decisions to optimize their outcomes in precision medicine. Get a second opinion, get their tissue bank, know their genomics, be willing to participate in a trial. So when we brought this to the other organizations, it was amazing to see not only the similarities in terms of the gaps, but also the willingness of patients. I mean, it was like between 90 and 100% of patients said, I will share my data to advance research. That's so exciting. What was even more interesting was they were more willing to share genomics data, de-identified data, than their own contact information, which is back to your first question, a little bit of a challenge. But still, I mean, it shows that there's that willingness, and it went across. So when you have this commonality of needs, opportunities, willingness, I mean, when we tested the right track, just the concepts across different cancer patients, they all loved it. They all, whether they had pancreatic cancer, myeloma, metastatic breast cancer, they all said, this is exactly what we need. If we had something this simple and guidance in terms of how to find these resources and how to get involved and share data, that's all we need. And so again, finding these commonalities has been amazing. And then certainly the resources brought in terms of these DTC companies. I mean, Blair, you have no connection to any of this, and you're here again. It's awesome. I mean, we are so grateful.
I have your Venn diagram up in front of me, and it is a constant reminder.
But I think one of the things that we find it's interesting is the folks that are in direct-to-consumer, sometimes they're in their day-to-day lives and they feel like, and Laura used to say this when she was at Pepsi, like, how much more soda can I possibly sell and feel really good about this? And so for them, they're so excited to actually bring their skill sets back and say, I want to be part of curing cancer, and I think it really is important to do. I want to talk a little bit. So, so far we've been talking about the importance of patients, connecting with trusted third parties, providing their email addresses to us, because it's surprisingly not as easy to do as you would think. But we're also doing this because we want patient data. So, we have to go deeper with these patients to actually build out what we call registries, where we actually say to them, okay, we don't have to get all patient data through an academic center, especially if it's not so easy to get that data shared. We can do a roundabout and go directly to the patient. So what's interesting on this direct-to-patient group, 3 of the groups are building registries. So even while we're on the phone talking about how do you add value, how do you get an email, it's the exact same situation on a registry.
Right.
No patient is going to give you any element of data unless they trust you. And now what you see going on with Facebook and, patients don't like giving data to pharma. Even with, Tony was talking about the All of Us program. A challenge there is that they don't want to give their data to the government either. But we are patients. We are, groups run by patients, so we tend to be highly trusted. So talk with me a little bit about how you see a registry building out and what you've learned that can help with that space.
Well, I think the other piece, and especially looking at an All of Us, it's not just trust, it's delivering the value. So we're in a really good position to be able to deliver value back to patients, not only getting them to the right doctor, getting the right tests, getting the right treatments, but they share data with us. We can say, oh, okay, we see based on what your EMR shows or what you've self-reported that you may be right for these trials. Okay, let us have one of our people from our call centers get in touch with you, help you enroll in the trial. So what we're doing at the MMRF, as one example, because I think the registries across the organizations look very different, is we had this longitudinal study, some of you may know COMPASS. It costs almost $50 million. It took us 4 years to enroll 1,100 patients in 76 centers in 4 countries. Not the easiest thing to accomplish. So we said, okay, we need to build on that data set. Myeloma is a heterogeneous population. Patients are spread out everywhere. 80% of the community, we need to involve community sites as well. So sharing data, and Lori's not here, but with places like Dana-Farber is really important too, but we can't wait for all that to happen. We now have the opportunity to go direct to patient, technology's on our side to say, will you consent online to sharing your EMR with us? Will you sign a medical waiver? For those of you who know myeloma, you need to get a bone marrow sample. Thankfully, there's now liquid biopsies coming into reality, and we can send patients a tube of blood and say, return this to us. We will sequence it for you and give you that data back. So even if you're not seen at a big academic center, you're going to get the same amount of information about your multiple myeloma as someone at an academic center would. That way we can build out the data set much, much, much more efficiently and start to answer patient questions and give them the value back in terms of, okay, when you look at patients like you, here's how they did on certain treatments. This may be the right treatment for you. Sit down with your doctor and map that out, as opposed to, well, I haven't tried this one before, so we're going to give you that drug or that combination of drugs. And again, trying to do it much more efficiently, but making sure that we deliver the value back to patients, because then patients aren't going to trust us and they won't engage.
Yep. We have a registry. It's not as old or as robust yet as yours. It's only a couple of years old. The one thing I would say, again, going back to the building the trust, and this, it's a quid pro quo, right? We want to give patients information, but we also need their data. We need stuff back from them. And so it's kind of like it's this symbiotic dance that we do. I would say that our call center, Patient Central, is just a critical component to our ability to reach and engage and really build a relationship with patients. It's housed in our office. We have about 165,000 contacts into the program since it was started, around 35,000 each year. And these are people on the phone speaking to patients and caregivers day in, day out. And so we do a lot of our marketing, all roads lead to Patient Central, because we know that if they get to one of our associates who are compassionate and who are knowledgeable, our associate is going to be able to talk to them about the registry, about clinical trials, about having their molecular profiling, going and using our Know Your Tumor molecular profiling service. And so again, I just think that that's a key component for us in being able to get the data that we need.
Yeah, I was just going to say the word that keeps coming up today is trust. And it's interesting, right? Tawana from Facebook isn't here because everything that's going on with Facebook. And at the end of the day, it really is, it's not, I mean, the senators, a lot of them that questioning Mark Zuckerberg, it was clear they've never been on Facebook, they don't understand. But most people understand, right? Facebook is in the business of selling ads. I don't think that in and of itself was a breach of trust. But at the end of the day, there's a breach there in a couple of different ways that were about trust. And I think it's interesting, as I reflect on everything we've talked about this morning, there's a level of trust, and I love what Mark Kramer said about, everyone wants to do collective impact if it's easy. It's like, we'll do it as long as I get my way. Right. And so I think what we've seen is a level of trust, this whole speed of trust that these organizations have built incredibly quickly. And part of it is people saying, okay, I might not have asked the question exactly that way on the market research, but you know what? Greater good, or I don't love that particular illustration on the campaign, but greater good. So I think the level of trust in terms of sharing, but also not feeling the obsessive need to control and get their way on everything is incredible. And then there's trust, as we're talking about, with building trust as the organization, so that somebody will give you, even just to give you their email and sign up for a newsletter, let alone be in your registry and give you all of that information. I just think what you're seeing is, trust with patients, trust with each other. And then one of the things that we've learned from all the brand companies that we've talked to is they are all about, building trust with consumers, trusted brands, transparency. And I know we've been throwing those terms around probably for 30 years, but more than ever, it's so important with everything that there is, the transparency in the world with social media and digital media, that trust has to be there. Yeah. So I think it's kind of a common theme for us.
Agree.
In everything we're talking about.
I'm going to open it up and get some comments and questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, ladies. Obviously, we've worked together on the direct-to-patient work stream already, but I'm Blair Hammond from Reebok. I'm a digital marketer that's come in to help the group in their D2C, for me, D2C, D2P for you guys, efforts. I want to echo that the candor in these conversations is extremely impressive coming from the private sector. No one shares any of their data. We're even owned by a parent company. We don't share anything. So it's very impressive, and I think it's good for the group to hold each other's feet to the fire to meet these expectations. My question is, in this effort to double patients, or the amount of patients we have access to, what is the single biggest barrier to making that happen?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I'm going to let you guys answer it, but I'll say one of the things is, so I think the organizations are not as focused on it as they need to be. So go to the website of any of these organizations and you'll get a button for donate now and join this race and do this and do that. And maybe somewhere on there, there's like a sign up for our e-newsletter. So as organizations, typically it's kind of the, inspect what you expect. And so there's two things. I think one is there's some basic mechanics of, if this matters to you, on every single page and every interaction, make it easy for somebody to give their email, and don't ask them for 22 questions and sign up for an account with a password. Just literally get their name, email, and are you a patient or not. So easy. We have so much room to go on kind of, if I'm doing a Maslow's hierarchy, kind of bottom of the pyramid. We're just not doing that well. And then in the spirit of kind of, dashboards and scorecards is, I'm on nonprofit boards. I know what the revenue is of all of those companies, and I know how much money they're spending on programming. Up until this year, in 14 years on the MMRF board, we never talked about for what % of patients, of multiple myeloma patients, do you have qualified email that you can get back in touch with them. So some basic non-sexy things like sort of, asking for it at every point in an easy way, and then through all levels of the organization, up through the CEO and the board, not just on your digital marketing team, know that information and hold people accountable for growing that number. So those are two things that I'll start with.
I think just to build on that, there's a couple of other things. One, and I only discovered this is, we're supposed to report this. I was told internally, okay, we have this number of patients in our database, only to come to find out half of them were bad addresses. It's like, okay, well, don't tell me that we have 20,000 if really we can only reach 10 of them, because we don't really have 20,000. Right. So I think in covering some of these things where there was somewhat of a focus, but not really drilling down, and so that's one comment. Answering more of your question, Blair, it's going to where the patients are as well.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
we've already captured the patients who are motivated and
Right.
who are looking for more and who want to get the newsletter or who want to do a race. How do we reach those other patients? And I think now, with retargeting and being able to go after certain audiences who may be, on other myeloma group, join other myeloma groups on Facebook, trying to go that way, because waiting for them to come to us is not going to happen, especially, again, in an older population,
Right.
very dependent on their doctor. Their doctors are referring them to us. We have to go to where they are.
Yep.
Lou.
Yeah, I'd like to answer Blair's question in a different way. I think the barrier is money. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So, Jenny, you talked about the dollars that consumer-facing organizations spend, whether they're medical centers or Pepsi or Keurig, use to reach their consumers. The reality in the not-for-profit arena is that marketing, advertising, even public relations are dirty words. These are dirty words in the not-for-profit industry. A dollar that goes to marketing, a dollar that goes to an advertising campaign is a dollar less for program, is a dollar less for mission. Charity watchdogs, are very focused on our SG&A, the dollars that we spend on operations, and that's where the marketing dollars go. Donors, in my experience, donors don't want to support, they want to support research or funding for patients, or they don't want to support that. The reality is I think we have to, as an industry, find a way to reorient the importance of advertising, direct-to-consumer outreach. You said it wonderfully. We have a wonderful message and we have wonderful services for patients, but they never find us. And somehow we have to find a way to get around that barrier of the lack of understanding of the necessity for advertising. And break through that and create, work with some folks who can create really telling direct-to-consumer advertising, I'll use that word, so that we can, I would love the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society to be a household name, because for all the reasons you described, when it comes into a patient's life, they would know to come to us. Just doesn't happen today.
I would agree, and I think that we also, one of our strategic priorities is to be the go-to organization in pancreatic cancer, and it does come back to how do we get the word out there. I don't know if you've read any of Dan Pallotta's book, but exactly what you're saying, we need to reorient our thinking around what nonprofits. The traditional nonprofit no longer looks like the traditional nonprofit and shouldn't. We are definitely thinking outside the box. We're bringing all the stakeholders to the room. I mean, look what we're doing here. And one point I would just say is I do think that that's not going to happen overnight, clearly. But in the meantime, something like this Accelerator program, where we're going to be deploying a bigger digital campaign collectively, has the opportunity and the potential, I think, to break out and to amplify our voice and to get the message out there.
And I just want to, another group, and Joy, I hope it's okay if I cold call you, because you are at HBS, so we do that. So Joy works at Patients Like Me, and I think, one trend you're hearing is we're very cancer focused, but we're involving other groups, whether it's now diabetes or Alzheimer's, because precision medicine is, we lead in precision medicine oncology, but it doesn't mean, it's a health issue. It doesn't mean that others don't care about it. They do. So one group we work with is Patients Like Me, where we've been sharing all kinds of ideas. And they will tell you they're not nearly as strong as oncology, but they're doing beautiful registry work in other diseases, and we're sharing our best practices. Do you want to just talk about that for a sec before we have to?
Sure. I've been with Patients Like Me for about 2.5 years, so thank you. This is my first meeting with you guys. Thank you for inviting me.
She had Kim Chen was with us for a while.
Kim Chen
and
was on my team.
Yeah.
So I manage the marketing and patient engagement team. So that's everything from advertising to engagement to our communities and forums. And so we definitely have an attract, engagement, retain, value-driven system. I have a consumer marketing background, so they brought me in knowing that we needed to get a little stronger in that area. And like Lori and I were talking about earlier, just treating our patients like people. So that's been a major focus for me. And Yeah, I mean, we do it across disease states. It depends on what the focus is. Right now, we're really in ALS, MS, PD, different autoimmune disease states more than cancer at this point, but it doesn't mean that we don't have ways that, I mean, I'm like over here jotting down notes like, we can do this and we can do this. And I think, you know, members of my team would be really interested in helping too, because we really do put the patient first and think of them in everything that we do. But, you know, just the background in direct to consumer and how you actually go about engaging them and what that process is, it's the same. So happy to help in any way possible.
And I think one of the things we learned early on, Kim Chen was with us, and she made some comment kind of offhandedly as though everybody was doing this about some of the digital efforts that they were doing. So not, you know, big advertising, but, you know, digital marketing, that some of it was funded by pharma. And I think about, you know, over the years at the MMRF, we've looked at some of the like wonky things we've done just to get the pharma money. Like it's almost like we've done this tactic because that's what pharma wanted to do, but it really wasn't necessarily the best thing that we could have done. And so I think sometimes there's an opportunity, Lou, while we're trying to, you know, to get more money and change the way things work, there's money out there that if we put it into, if we used it really smartly, we could digitally get some of our message out there. And I think that was something we learned.
We're extremely prudent with the money, but we figure out how to optimize it over time. But, you know, it's multi-channel and it's integrated and having the content and the experts and bringing, even having you guys, like just speaking to you guys and talking to the community about the organizations that would be meaningful to the patient. Any information we can give to our patients that it drives value to them and their overall care. That's how we build the trust, right? So it's all about sharing both ways.
Exactly. Okay, with that, thank you very much for your panel. We're going to take a break for 15 minutes. Thanks, everybody.